I still remember the way the envelope felt in my hand. It wasn't heavy, not really. But it felt like it carried the weight of something far more personal, something unspoken. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to open at all. It was my 18th birthday. A milestone. The kind of day you're supposed to remember for the rest of your life. And I will. Just, not for the reasons most people do. My brother Ryan had already bolted out the door. I could still hear the roar of his brand new BMW in the driveway. His second one, actually. The first had been the wrong color. The wrong color. I mean, who gets a second luxury car because the first isn't blue enough? And me? I got a one-way bus ticket. No card. No cake. Just a folded slip of paper and a sentence that hit harder than anything I'd ever been told. You're legally an adult now. Time to make your own way. She said it like she was giving me a gift. Like she expected me to thank her. And maybe I should have. Maybe in a strange backwards way I owe her everything. But in that moment all I felt was empty. Not angry. Not surprised. Just tired. Tired of waiting to be chosen. If you've ever sat quietly at your own family's table and wondered if they'd even notice if you left, this story is for you. Because sometimes the most painful moments are the ones where nothing is said at all. No shouts. No slammed doors. Just silence. And in that silence I realized something. Love in my house was measured in things, keys, ribbons, metal, luxury. And the absence of those things, that said more than words ever could. This isn't a story about revenge. Or about getting even. It's a story about remembering your own worth. Even when no one else seems to. So if you're watching this because a part of you feels like the shadow in someone else's spotlight, stay with me. Because this is where the light shifts. I used to think that maybe I was just too quiet. That maybe if I had spoken louder, laughed harder, asked for more, maybe then they would have seen me. But no matter how much I tried to be present, it always felt like I was living life from the edges of the frame, blurry, cropped out, almost there. But not quite. Growing up, my brother Ryan was the sun, and the rest of us simply revolved around him. He was loud, confident, athletic. He made jokes that didn't always land, but people laughed anyway. He never waited for permission to take up space, he just did. And the world, especially our parents, made sure there was always space for him. Then there was me. The easy one. The low-maintenance child. I never caused trouble, never asked for much. I was the kind of kid teachers praised for being so well-behaved, but who always got left out of the group photo. Always there, never remembered. I remember one birthday, maybe my 12th. Ryan had a party with balloons, cake, the whole neighborhood invited. For me that year I got a slice of leftover cake from the fridge. No candle. No song. No one even said the words. Happy birthday. Just silence. It wasn't the first time. I broke my wrist once when I was 11. Fell off my bike riding home from school. No one was home, so I walked myself to urgent care. Sat in the waiting room for over an hour, cradling my arm, watching kids half my age get called back with parents holding their hands. When I finally got home in a cast, Mom just said, "Well, maybe now you'll be more careful." That was the moment I realized. I wasn't the priority. Not then. Not ever. There's this quiet ache that settles in when you realize you're not the favorite. Not even close. And worse, you're not even disliked. You're just overlooked. Like background music in someone else's story. Some people think the opposite of love is hate. It's not. It's indifference. Indifference is what settles in when you sit at dinner with your family, and no one asks how your day was. When you win an award at school and hang it on the fridge yourself. When you start dimming your light just to stop feeling so alone in the dark. I didn't even realize I was shrinking until one day, I couldn't find myself anymore. I got good at reading rooms, at sensing Carla's moods from the way she stirred her coffee, at dodging Ryan's cruel jokes before they landed, at doing everything right so maybe, just maybe, I'd get noticed. I thought if I was perfect they'd have to love me. But the truth is, you can't earn love in a house that doesn't know how to give it. That's the hard part, isn't it? The part we don't talk about. The fact that some of us grew up learning to make ourselves invisible, not because we wanted to, but because we believed it was safer. And for a while it was safer not to ask, not to expect, not to hope. But what they don't tell you is that even when you try to disappear, the need to be seen doesn't go away. It just hides deep, quiet, waiting for a moment. A voice, person, something, anything that says, I see you. And that's why I'm telling you this now. Because if you're still living in the shadows of your own family, still asking what's wrong with you instead of what's missing around you, I need you to know something. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not a backup child. You are not a burden. You're just someone who's been asked to accept crumbs and call it a feast. And maybe you've been doing that so long you forgot what it feels like to be full. But there's more. There is so much more waiting for you. And this story, it's just getting started. There's something most people don't realize about kids who seem quiet, obedient, easy to raise. We're not born that way. We become that way. It starts slow, so slow you almost don't notice. A missed goodnight, forgotten promise, a moment when your feelings are brushed aside with a sigh or a scoff, and you think, maybe I'm just being dramatic. Maybe I need to be easier, lighter, quieter. So you start shrinking. You stop asking questions at dinner. You stop sharing your wins because no one claps. You learn that if you cry, it won't bring anyone running. So you stop crying too. I became a master of invisibility in my own home. Not because I wanted to be, but because it felt safer. I learned to listen more than I spoke. I became hyper-aware of Carla's moods. Could tell when she was stressed just by the way she walked into a room. I tiptoed around her, made myself useful, made myself small. I became so good at disappearing that sometimes I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Ryan, on the other hand, didn't shrink. He stormed. He shouted. He demanded. And he was rewarded for it. I watched how his loudness earned him attention, even if it wasn't always kind. At least he was acknowledged. Me? I was the good one. The one who didn't need much. The one who always handled things well. They thought that was praise. I carried it like a sentence. Because what no one tells you is that when you're labeled the easy child, what they really mean is, we don't have time for you. So I became easy. I did my homework without being asked. I cleaned my room without complaint. I ate dinner even when no one remembered to serve me a plate. I smiled when Ryan made jokes at my expense because I thought if I laughed along it would hurt less. It didn't. I remember one night, maybe around 14, I overheard Carla talking to a neighbor on the phone. She was bragging about Ryan, about his sports awards, his charm, his big future. Then the neighbor must have asked about me because Carla hesitated before saying, "Oh yeah, she's doing fine. Real quiet. No trouble at all." That was it. My entire existence, summed up in a sentence so empty it echoed. I remember sitting in my room afterward, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would take to be worth a story. That night I stopped trying to be noticed. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival. Because hope was starting to feel dangerous. Hope meant waiting for something that never came. And every time it didn't come, it broke something deeper. So I stopped waiting. Instead, I focused on control. I became obsessed with getting things right. With being responsible. With not giving them any reason to feel disappointed in me. Because I already carried the quiet belief that I was a disappointment by default. I built my life around pleasing people who didn't look up when I walked in a room. That's what shrinking does. It teaches you to erase yourself so you don't take up space in someone else's discomfort. It teaches you to pre-apologize for your own existence. And it works. Until one day it doesn't. Because one day someone asks you a simple question. Like, what do you want? And you realize you have no idea. No one's ever asked. Not even you. That's when it hits you. You haven't been living. You've been performing. And that performance, it's exhausting. The truth is, I didn't know who I was, only who I was supposed to be in their eyes. The quiet one. The easy one. The invisible one. But invisibility is a heavy costume to wear. And eventually, I started to wonder what it would feel like to take it off. To take up space. To speak first. To say no. To be seen. This story, my story, is about learning to do exactly that. And maybe, just maybe, if you've ever felt like you had to disappear to survive, this story is yours too. There's a strange kind of stillness that comes the night before you leave home for good. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just quiet, like the house already knows you're about to disappear from it. That night, after they gave me the bus ticket, I packed slowly. One pair of jeans. A few t-shirts. My sketchbook. A charger. The journal I always kept hidden behind my dresser. Filled with thoughts I never dared say out loud. It didn't take long. When you've grown up learning not to take up space, you learn to live light. It all fit into one old suitcase and a backpack. And somehow that made it hurt more. I didn't have much to take, but I had even less to leave behind. No one came upstairs to say goodbye. Not Carla. Not David. Not even Ryan. They went to bed like it was any other night. Like I was just another box being moved off the shelf. Quiet, simple, forgettable. I stayed up the whole night, staring at the ceiling, tracing the shadows that danced across the walls. The posters I'd taped up when I was 13 looked childish now. The desk where I once did homework felt like it belonged to someone else. At sunrise, the light spilled through the cracked blinds, soft and golden. It should have been beautiful, but I felt numb. Like the sadness had burned itself out while I wasn't looking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just zipped up the suitcase, slung the backpack over my shoulder, and took one last look at the room that had held both my childhood and my silence. Downstairs, Carla was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, sipping her usual black coffee. She didn't look up. "Bus leaves at 10, she muttered, like she was reading a grocery list. "I know," I replied. Still nothing. No eye contact. No parting words. No second thoughts. David was already at work. That was his thing, disappearing during the hard stuff, showing back up when it was safe. I used to resent it. Now I just accepted it. Ryan was outside, polishing the car. The car. The symbol of everything I wasn't. Everything I didn't get. He didn't even glance up when I walked out. The bus station wasn't far. I walked there. Every step felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream I didn't want to be awake for. But my legs kept going. And when I sat down in that faded blue seat, surrounded by the smell of old leather and gasoline, something inside me shifted. This wasn't a vacation. It wasn't an escape. It was an exit. But not just from the house. From the version of me that had waited too long to be loved by people who never learned how. When the bus pulled away, I didn't wave. There was no one to wave to. Just a quiet road behind me, and a city I'd never been to ahead. Phoenix. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have a plan. All I had was a few $100s from freelance gigs and a heart that had been broken too many times to be scared anymore. It's funny, really. The freedom didn't feel like flying. Felt like falling with no one to catch you but somehow still choosing to jump. I watched the trees blur past the window and whispered to myself, "This is it. This is where it begins." And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to start over. I had already started. I didn't expect kindness. Not anymore. By the time I stepped off that bus in Phoenix, I had trained myself to keep expectations low. That way disappointment wouldn't sting so much. I didn't look around hoping someone would be there. I knew no one would be. But somehow that made the city feel like a blank page. No past, no history. Just the sound of traffic, the heat rising off the pavement, and the thrum of something new beginning. I found the room above the bakery from a last-minute listing online. It was small, barely more than a bed, a window, and a door that stuck if you didn't jiggle it just right. But it was mine. Paid for 2 weeks in advance, no questions asked. That's how I met Ruth. She was the bakery owner, in her 60s maybe, with strong arms and soft eyes. When I walked in with my suitcase and the weariness of someone who'd left everything behind, she didn't ask why. She just nodded and handed me the key. "No parties, no smoking, and don't forget to eat," she said. Eat. It had been hours since I had. I didn't say much that first day. I was too tired to pretend I was fine and too guarded to admit I wasn't. But the next morning, I woke up to the smell of cinnamon and warm bread seeping through the floorboards. It wrapped around me like a blanket. When I came downstairs, Ruth was behind the counter, boxing pastries with practiced hands. "You sleep okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, thank you." She slid a croissant across the counter. "On the house." I hesitated. "I'm good, really." She didn't move her hand. "You look like someone who hasn't had a proper breakfast in a while. Just take it." So I did. It's a strange thing being seen in such a simple human way. When you grow up invisible, even the smallest gestures feel enormous. Over the next few days, we developed a quiet rhythm. I came down early. She handed me coffee without asking how I took it. Sometimes she talked mostly about the bakery, her late husband, the cost of flour, the customers who left Yelp reviews that made her roll her eyes. Sometimes she didn't talk at all, and that was okay too. I never told her much, but she seemed to know enough. One morning, I helped her bring in a shipment. She looked at me and said, "You carry things like you've been doing it alone for a long time." That stopped me cold. She didn't say it with pity, just observation, like she wasn't guessing. She knew. And in that moment something cracked open. Not all the way. Not enough for tears. But just enough to feel it, that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. Maybe I had just never been somewhere safe enough to show the cracks. That's the thing about people like Ruth. They don't try to fix you. They just offer warmth until you begin to thaw. She never tried to replace anyone. She didn't push. But her presence, steady and simple, reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. People can care without conditions. Not everyone gives love like a transaction. Some people just give. And for someone like me who'd spent a lifetime trying to earn scraps of affection, that was revolutionary. We talk so much about healing like it's this big, dramatic process, therapy sessions, breakdowns, epiphanies. But sometimes healing begins with a croissant and a conversation. Sometimes it starts with someone seeing you when they don't have to. Ruth never asked about my past. She never pressed me for stories. But one day she handed me a note with the Wi-Fi password and said, "If you're trying to build something, use this." And I did. Because of her, I logged into the email that would change everything. Because of her, I started to believe maybe I deserved to be seen. Kindness from a stranger doesn't erase the pain that came before it. But sometimes it plants a seed that says you get to begin again. And that, in itself, can be enough. There are people you meet in life who don't just look at you. They see you. Not the version you've polished for survival. Not the mask you wear to make others comfortable. But the real you. The version buried beneath years of silence, rejection, and trying too hard to be enough. For me, that person was Marianne. We'd only exchanged a few emails. She was a client. A tech founder who'd hired me to design a logo through a freelance site. Her messages were brief but warm. She had this way of making directness feel like a gift, not a demand. After I moved into the room above Ruth's bakery, I emailed her again. Just a simple update, nothing dramatic. I told her I was in Phoenix now, figuring things out, and would be happy to take on more work if anything came up. She responded in less than 5 minutes. "Meet me. Tomorrow 10 a.m. My office. Wear confidence." I stared at the screen for a while, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The next morning I borrowed a clean shirt from the thrift store down the street and arrived 10 minutes early. Her office was sleek but lived in. A giant whiteboard covered in scribbles. Plants in mismatched pots. A dog bed in the corner. Marianne was exactly how I imagined her, mid-40s, sharp eyes, no nonsense, but she smiled when she saw me, and that smile was real. "You made it," she said. I nodded, heart pounding. "Thanks for this." For even replying. She motioned for me to sit. "You've got something. Not just talent. Focus. Resilience." I like people who don't wait to be told they're ready. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. We talked for nearly an hour. About design, branding, vision. But also about stories, how they shape people, how good design is really about making others feel something. It wasn't just a meeting. It was recognition. And for someone like me, who had spent a lifetime being looked over, that meant everything. By the end of the week, she had me on contract, part-time, flexible hours, fair pay. But more than that, she gave me something I'd never had before. A place where I was allowed to take up space. She assigned me real projects. Asked for my opinion. Introduced me to her team like I belonged there. And when I apologized one day for turning something in late, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't ever apologize for doing your best. Just do better tomorrow." Sounds simple. But no one in my life had ever said anything like that before without it being laced with shame or judgment. Marianne didn't coddle. She didn't hand out compliments like candy. But when she said something kind, it landed like truth. One afternoon after a team meeting, she pulled me aside. "You carry yourself like someone who's always waiting for the other shoe to drop," she said. I froze. She wasn't wrong. She added, "Just so you know, there's no shoe. Not here." It was in that moment I realized something. All my life I had been performing for people who would never clap. But here, for the first time, I wasn't performing. I was contributing. I was showing up. I was being seen. That kind of validation, the kind that comes without strings or games or manipulation, is rare. And when you've never had it, it almost feels too good to trust. But I chose to trust it. Marianne didn't change my life with a grand gesture. She didn't rescue me. What she did was more powerful. She held up a mirror and said, "Look, you're already enough." And when you've grown up thinking you're invisible, being seen, really seen, is the most radical thing that can happen. Sometimes healing doesn't come in big moments. Sometimes it looks like someone believing in you before you believe in yourself. And for the first time in my life, I started to wonder, what if I was never the problem? What if all I needed was the right mirror? Revenge was never my thing. Even after everything, the silence, the dismissal, the ticket instead of love, I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to throw it back in their faces. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to be seen. When Ryan texted me, "Dinner Saturday. Everyone's home. Mom said you should come," I stared at my phone for a long time. Not because I was excited. Not because I missed them. But because I realized something they didn't. They still thought I needed them. They thought I'd show up small, quiet, thankful for a seat at the table I was never invited to before. But I wasn't that person anymore. And that's when the idea came. I didn't want to go back and beg. I didn't want to prove anything. I wanted to show them, not in anger, not in pride, but in clarity, exactly what they'd let go. So I texted Marianne, "Do you think your driver could help me make an impression Saturday night?" Her reply came fast. "A limo or a statement piece?" I smiled for the first time in days. Both. On Saturday afternoon, the limo pulled up in front of the bakery. It wasn't flashy, sleek, dark gray tinted windows. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. Ruth peeked through the front window and gave me a quiet nod. I waved back. My hand trembled just a little. Inside the car, soft music played and the seats smelled like polished leather. I sat there, breathing deeply, smoothing down the black jumpsuit Alma had helped me choose from the little boutique tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. It wasn't about the clothes. It wasn't about the car. It was about what they represented. All my life I had been told, sometimes with words, more often with silence, that I didn't matter. That I was second place. Background. Filler. But this time I wasn't showing up to ask for love. I was showing up to own my space. When the limo turned down my old street, my heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was a kind of certainty. A knowing. The house looked the same. Perfect hedges. White siding. Ryan's car still gleaming in the driveway. But I was not the same. I asked the driver to wait 2 minutes before opening the door. I checked my reflection one last time. My makeup was soft, intentional. My lips a deep red. My eyes focused. Then I nodded. The door opened. And I stepped out. It was like time stopped. Ryan was the first to see me. He leaned on his car, smirked, but the smirk didn't reach his eyes. There was confusion there. Something unsettled. "Well," he said, "someone's trying hard tonight." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Carla stepped out next. Arms crossed. Brows raised. That familiar tight line across her lips. "You came in a limo?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, almost mocking. "Where'd you get the money for that?" I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. I didn't owe her an answer. Behind her, David lingered in the doorway, eyes flicking from me to the car, to the others, back to me. He didn't speak. For a moment we just stood there. Them on the porch. Me on their perfect driveway. And for the first time I wasn't trying to fit in. I wasn't trying to win anything. I wasn't hoping to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. "I didn't come to impress you," I said quietly, evenly. "I came to show you what you let go." No one spoke. And that was enough. The limo wasn't revenge. It wasn't a show. It was a mirror. Held up to a family that had always looked through me. And for once they couldn't. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. The thing about going back isn't the fear. It's the quiet knowing that nothing has changed. Except you. When I stepped into the house I grew up in, everything looked exactly the same. The framed pictures on the wall. The scent of overused air freshener. The sound of silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that hums with things unsaid. The dining table was set perfectly. Plates aligned, wine glasses sparkling. There was a roast in the center, too perfect to be homemade. Probably store-bought, but no one mentioned it. They didn't ask how I'd been. They didn't say they missed me. They didn't even ask why I came. We all sat down, each person in their usual seat. Ryan sprawled like he owned the room. Carla stiff, composed, in control. David pretending to read the label on the wine bottle, like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. The air was tight with tension, but no one spoke it aloud. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "So what, you're rich now?" I looked at him and saw it for the first time. Not the confident older brother I used to fear, but a boy still orbiting around approval like it was oxygen. "No," I said calmly. "But I'm free. And I'm doing better without you." He blinked. Carla scoffed like she just heard a bad joke. "Oh please," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't act like we didn't give you anything." I tilted my head, leaned in slightly. "You're right. You did." She froze, unsure whether it was sarcasm or gratitude. I placed my elbows gently on the table and spoke slowly, each word landing like a stone. "You gave me a one-way bus ticket." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. David cleared his throat, but didn't say a word. Ryan suddenly had nothing to add. And Carla just looked at me like she didn't recognize the person sitting across from her. Because she didn't. This wasn't the quiet, careful version of me who used to walk on eggshells, begging silently to be seen. This was someone who had finally seen herself. I looked around the table and realized something else. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need them to apologize or explain or even understand. I just needed to stop waiting for them to. So I stood up, slow and certain, brushed off my jumpsuit like I was shaking off years of silence. "I don't need this dinner," I said softly. "I don't need this house. And I don't need your love." And then, as steady as I'd ever spoken, I added, "I don't need you. Not out of cruelty. Not out of anger. Just truth." That's when it happened, the shift. Because they didn't have a response. For once, my absence spoke louder than their presence. I walked to the door, heels clicking against the polished floor. No one followed. No one stopped me. And strangely, that didn't hurt. It was a kind of clarity I never expected to find at that table. I stepped outside and the air hit me like a fresh start. The limo was still waiting. The driver opened the door, silent and respectful. As I slid into the seat and the city lights began to blur past the window, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Power. Not the loud, arrogant kind. Not the kind you use to control others. But the quiet kind. The kind that comes from finally knowing your worth. From no longer begging to be seated at a table that was never built for you. That night, I didn't lose a family. I reclaimed myself. Closure is one of those words we grow up believing in like magic. It's the idea that if you just get the right apology, the perfect explanation, the missing piece, then the pain will stop. You'll finally understand. You'll finally feel at peace. But that's not how it works. Not for all of us. Not for me. After that dinner, after the limo, after the silence, I kept waiting. Just for a moment, for someone to reach out. A text. A voicemail. Something. It didn't come. David sent me a short message a few weeks later. "Hope you're doing well." I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what to feel. There was no warmth in it, no ownership, no "I'm sorry." Just distance, neatly typed and sent from a phone that had once belonged to my father. I didn't reply. Ryan tagged me in an Instagram story a month later. It was a quote that said, "Family always finds its way back." I muted him. Carla. Nothing. Not a word. And oddly, that was the part that hurt the least. Because by then, I'd stopped expecting her to show up. She never really had. At first, I kept replaying the dinner in my head. Should I have stayed longer? Should I have said more? Should I have given them one more chance to explain? But that voice, the one that used to live in me that always asked what did I do wrong, had grown quieter. And in its place, a new voice had started to rise. A calm one. One that said, you don't need an ending to move on. You just need to stop waiting for the one they'll never give you. That's the real closure. It's not the moment someone says they were wrong. It's not hearing "I love you" from someone who never learned how to say it when it mattered. It's you. Choosing to stop asking questions that have no answers. Choosing to stop bleeding for people who never brought you a bandage. Choosing to stop looking back. That's not easy. There are days when the ache returns soft, dull, Like a bruise you forgot you had until something brushes against it. It happens when I see pictures of other families. When I watch someone hug their mom in a grocery store. When I hear someone laugh and call their sibling their best friend. It stings. Not because I'm jealous, but because I finally understand that I never had that. And I probably never will. But that's okay. Because the absence of something can teach you just as much as its presence. I learned what love should feel like by remembering everything it never was. I learned what I deserved by recognizing what I survived. I learned how to choose people who choose me. I don't live above the bakery anymore. A month after that dinner, I got promoted at Marion's startup. Creative lead. A title I earned not because I shouted for attention, but because someone finally listened when I spoke. I moved into a small loft downtown. My own space. My own furniture. My own peace. And right by the front door in a simple black frame hangs the bus ticket they gave me. Not as a scar. As a reminder that sometimes the people who push you away are just making space for the person you're meant to become. And the closure? You don't wait for it. You write it yourself. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a breakthrough. It looks like a bus ticket in a frame. Right now, if you were to visit my apartment, the first place I've ever truly called my own, you'd see it. Hung right by the door. Simple. Small. Quiet. It's not there to remind me of the pain. It's there to remind me that I survived it. Because that ticket, the one they handed me like it was a favor, was supposed to be an ending. But it turned out to be my beginning. For a long time, I used to wonder how people became strong. I thought it came from confidence, from never being hurt, from having everything figured out. Now I know better. Strength isn't born from ease. It's born from endurance. From the nights you pack your things alone. From the mornings you choose to keep going even when no one notices. From the quiet decision to build something new out of everything that was broken. That ticket wasn't a rejection. It was permission given without knowing to become who I was always meant to be. And every time I pass by that frame, I'm reminded that pain can be powerful. Not because it defines us, but because it dares us to grow. Maybe you have something like that too. Not a bus ticket, but a moment, a sentence, a silence, a goodbye that changed everything. Something that still stings when you think about it. Something that tried to tell you who you weren't. But here's the truth. You get to decide who you are. Not the family who couldn't love you right. Not the people who walked away. Not the ones who said you're too much or not enough or nothing at all. You get to take the ticket. You get to frame it. You get to start over. And you don't have to wait for anyone to say you're ready. You already are. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. This story was mine, but maybe it's a little bit yours too. Maybe you've been the quiet kid in the room. The overlooked one. The background voice in someone else's spotlight. Maybe you've been waiting for the apology, the invitation, the recognition that never came. Maybe you're holding on to something that once felt like an ending. That's you. I hope you frame it. I hope you turn it into your strength. And I hope you remember. Your story doesn't end where someone else decided it would. Starts right here. With you. If this story spoke to something inside you, I'd love for you to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories that don't just entertain, but remind you of who you are and what you're capable of. And if you know someone who's still carrying their own ticket, still waiting for the world to see them, share this with them. Let's remind each other that healing is possible, and that sometimes the best chapters come after the hardest page turns. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.